There's a button down here. I think it might deactivate the lasers. But I can't reach it.
The cock. Use the cock.
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
Hello, Bartek. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Ryan Slewinski. How are you doing, Ryan Slewinski?
I feel like we should have that passion in us like this movie does. Like,
Sorry, I said your name wrong. RS.
RS. Thank you. B-Gas. But
BK. BCAS.
BK. He calls him. We'll get into the naming conventions of the film that we discussed, but
the very complicated naming conventions.
We are very subdued for a film that is up to here. It's very up to 11. We're at a 6 right now. Don't worry, we'll get up to an 11 as we go along. We have to be inspired, and we will be inspired by Bartek reminding us all of the name of the podcast and what we're doing here today.
All right, listen up, dum-dums, because you've all forgotten. This is Spit and Polish presents Pictures Powwow, the show where every week a film comes recommended from one of 3 sources. Sometimes it is me, and then the week after that it'll be Ryan.
Hello.
Like now.
Like now.
Ooh.
Hi.
And then next time after that, or after in the schedule, in the rotation, it is the listening people's choice. So at the end of this episode, you'll find out what the listening people's choice is for the next episode.
You can recommend films to us. Just reach out through our social medias or email. All of that is in the description of the episode. If you have a movie you want us to check out, just let us know. If we can find a copy of it, and if it's a film, we will watch it. So we'll get around to it at least. We strive to do our best to get there. And we have a fairly decent list right now, but we could always use more.
Mm-hmm.
And why spit and polish? You know, for people who aren't tuning in every single week, they may be a bit confused. They may say, are you a shoe shining podcast? Is that what you're up to?
If you only look up Spit and Polish, those 3 words on YouTube, you will think that that's all that phrase means.
It's all that phrase means, but what do we mean when we say it?
Well, that's why we say presents at the end, because we are Spit and Polish and we are presenting you with our content. And the reason why we went with the name Spit and Polish is not because we are enthusiasts of shining shoes with saliva. It is because we, both happen to be Polish and we're always spitting.
We both happen to be Polish, and we usually love to let you know by having a fun Polish fact. And Bartek is the place where that comes from. So, do you have any interesting or fun Polish facts for us today?
Earlier, like literally a couple of hours ago, I Googled Jack Black for some reason. I'll tell you why I Googled Jack Black later. He might be related to this episode. I don't know.
You just looked in a mirror and said, I need to Google Jack Black.
I need to Google myself. And it mentioned, basic not backstory, but like, background on him. And it mentioned like he's got this, and this descent. And one of them was Polish.
In what part of his look can you see that?
Other
Other than your facial structure.
Do we have the same structure of the face?
I personally never see your comparison, the comparison that people make to you and Jack Black.
To be honest,
it.
me neither. But it happens to me so often, and because I've been working in primary schools a lot the last 2 years, like I have kids yelling at me saying, "Hey, Jack Black."
I see the Zach Galifianakis comparison a lot more, especially when, say, like 5-6 years ago, you had fuller head of hair, you combed it in a very specific way that you don't now, and it was like, oh, that looks like Zach Galifianakis.
Yeah, that one I saw a lot more.
Especially when you would wear like your coat and scarf and stuff, like, oh, he looks like Zach Galifianakis, and sunglasses too. But nowadays, I don't know what Zach looks like now. I haven't seen him in a little while.
Same here. And I remember, not too long ago, someone mentioned, like, oh, you kind of look like the sheriff from Stranger Things. And I looked up a photo of that character. I'm like, oh, I can actually kind of see this one.
David Harbour, the actor from The Green Hornet. Never forget.
And he was also in End of Watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your film pick. He was also a shitty guy in that too. You also got horribly hurt and injured in that too. But we are here today to talk about Tenacious D in the Pick of Destiny. That is the film I recommended. I have a variety of reasons to pick this, but one of them is the fact that we are going through musicals this year. That was the goal last year. I wanted to do some more animated films, and we did. And this year, I was asked at the end of last year what will be 2024, and I just said the year of musicals, and we have managed to pick a fair amount of musicals. And so today we are here to talk about Tenacious D in the Pick of Destiny, which is a musical rock opera comedic movie affair in which Jack Black and Kyle Gass, who are a duo best known when they're together as Tenacious D, their comedy rock band. I grew up with their band. I had their CDs and stuff. They were ones that you would play on a road trip. That's very much how it was. And Tenacious D were just, if you were of a certain age range, a certain mentality, you just couldn't avoid Tenacious D. In a weird way, for me, it was weird to see Jack Black, the actor man, when I was like, oh, it's the Tenacious D guy, and he's being a lot more clean in School of Rock than in Tenacious D. And many people may know, of course, their big songs. Tribute is the big one for Tenacious D, which they, spoiler alert, tease at the very end of this film that they're trying to capture the greatest song in the world, and they can't remember it. And that's what Tribute is all about, in which it's a tribute to the greatest song in the world that they played against Satan, but they can't quite remember how the song was.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Have you heard that song? Are you familiar with that one at least?
Not really. I'm not too familiar with Tenacious D, actually.
Oh, interesting. So this is their film in which Jack Black and Kyle Gass and the director, who also writes for their stuff, got together, made a script, put out a film, and now we're here to talk about it. What would be the plot for this? Very simple. Two dipshits meet up in the land of Hollywood, want to be famous rock stars, but they lack that pure talent. They have the drive, but they don't have the talent, and they stumble across a conspiracy told to us by Ben Stiller in a very fun role, in which all of these great musicians, all of these great rock stars have the same pick. It is the Pick of Destiny, which is the broken tooth of Satan, and it gives you satanic powers, and they go on a road trip of sorts, on a quest, on a caper to get the pick, but mishaps are abound, breaking up of the band, all of the usual trappings that you see, but with a very loud, overwrought, crude sense of humor thrown in. If you are someone who is familiar with comedy, this is very much, I guess, a 2000s kind of Cheech and Chong type film. That's how I would describe it. Now, that's all said and done. Bartek, you said you weren't familiar with Tenacious D, but I guess you could tell us a bit about your familiarity with the two involved, and if you've ever seen this film or heard about it, or any remnants from this has drifted along into your stratosphere at any point.
I might have heard of it at some point. I think I've heard talk of the Tenacious D movie was a funny film. Growing up, I mostly knew Jack Black as, like you said, the cleaner image. He's that funny, comedy actor who's in School of Rock and things like that. And I remember in the mid-2000s, a fairly common thing you could find online was, and I guess this is kind of, outdated with the invention of AI voices and all that, was soundboards. Do you remember soundboards?
Of course I do.
Yeah, there would be a common soundboards, for people that don't know, would be like a thing online that you would find where someone's compiled voice clips of specific characters or people, and you click on a button that has a line on it, and then that line gets said.
Age of Empires had them built into the game.
There you go.
Where Mel Brooks from History of the World Part 1 would say, "It's good to be the king," and you're like, the fuck is Mel Brooks doing in Age of Empires? But he was there.
Yeah, and soundboard, you just click on it and enjoy, hearing the line at your, at your freedom. But then you'd also have videos people would make of them prank calling people using the soundboards, and they would all often be very funny. And I remember there was a Jack Black one that had like inappropriate lines, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And I always wondered, like, oh, why is, funny comedy Hollywood actor man saying all these weird lines about cock push-ups and saying the F word? It's very bizarre. And then, as the years went on, I found out, like, oh, a big thing that he does is Tenacious D, and the type of music they make is often very, adult, sophomoric kind of stuff. And, seeing this film, I don't know necessarily if any of the lines I remember from it were from this film, because it's Kyle Gass mostly talking about the cock push-ups.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it makes a bit more sense now, like, oh, okay, this is a thing, a Tenacious D thing, I guess.
You've also got to take into consideration we're 30 and 31. And so when we grew up, Jack Black was very much entering into the mainstream Hollywood affair of making films more suitable for children with things like School of Rock, eventually the Kung Fu Panda movies. But he's always been involved in more adult affair, more adult comedies and movies and stuff in big roles or small roles. And so for someone like yourself, you're like, whoa, Jack Black swearing and all that. But like for people at the time, it's like, this isn't, even if they didn't see Tenacious D, it's like, this isn't anything new. I mean, he was doing these things at the time. But like for us, we maybe got to know him for the school, like the kids' material, stuff for the younger ages. But it's not to deny that those films definitely launched him into where he is now. There's definitely a parallel there. But Jack Black, he's someone that's like, oh yeah, he was in Ron Burgundy, the Anchorman. He was in that. Do you remember? He was the biker that killed his dog at the beginning of the movie. He's like, oh yeah. And he's always been, he was in Mars Attacks, Tim Burton's Mars Attacks. And you're like, oh, there he is. And he's always been kind of circling around the place. And
I think he was a high school bully in a film.
Yeah, he was in
Neverending Story 3.
Yeah, one of the Neverending Stories. He's a high school bully. He's been around the block. But yeah, I had Tenacious D growing up as well, as well as his career in movies. And when this came out, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. You're like, oh, it's Jack Black's movie. Like the others were like, oh, Jack Black's in this movie. Oh, he's in Orange County. He's in this and this and this. But it's like, oh, this is Jack and Kyle's movie. Yeah, we're going to get it. And it opens up and you have the little animated sequence by the guy who did Ren and Stimpy. And you're like, fuck yeah.
John Kay, yeah.
And you're like, yes, this is it. And you have all of the musicians who are either inspirations for Tenacious D and or contemporaries. Like Dave Grohl is Satan, and is like, if you know Tenacious D, you're like, this is awesome because Dave Grohl's been involved in Tenacious D's work in the past. He's played Satan in some of their music clips. Yes, this is great, fun stuff. And to see that on the big screen in a feature film, and they're stringing together some of their bits, like the cock push-ups and stuff like this, and obviously some of the songs, but then some of the songs are clearly made for the film. And it's just like, oh, this is wonderful. And as a child who also grew up with some musicals, Rocky Horror Picture Show being one of them, I just delighted in seeing like a new one, like a new kind of madcap, high energy, bunch of shit put together musical. Meatloaf's in the movie at the very beginning as Jack Black's dad. And by the way, perfect casting for the Black family in this, huh? Where you got the mother who barely speaks, the brother, like they look great. But you got Meatloaf, and you're like, fuck yeah! Like, and you read the trivia, it's like Jack Black's like, I've always wanted Meatloaf as my dad and something, and you're like, yeah, wise choice. But then you get that kid who plays young Jack Black, and it's like, is it fair to say that is one of the best castings in a film ever?
I think that's fair to say, and we've seen that kid before.
He's been in a whole ton of things, and
he was in Drillbit Taylor.
As one of the mains.
I think I called him Jersey Jew in that.
And he's gone on to have a career still. Like, he's one of the main characters in The Goldbergs, and he's kept going, and but look at him in this movie, you're like, damn, this kid is Jack Black. So I saw this movie at the time on rental after it came out. Like, I don't know if it had a cinematic release here in Australia, and if it did, I lived in the country, so...
Yeah, this one's from 2006, right?
Yeah, 2006, like 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. Mid-2000s, no matter what.
I think it was same time as Nacho Libre,
Oh,
or
interesting.
bit before.
I
Maybe?
hated Nacho Libre, so
Hmm.
I wipe it from my mind. I saw it one time when I was on a plane, and I was so miserable.
I saw it in the cinema, but I haven't seen it
But
since.
I saw this on DVD from my video rental store. A little while after, we watched it with some friends and my family, and it was just such a great time, laughing. And there's some bits in this. I don't regularly revisit this. I do physically own it. It's in my collection of DVDs. And there's some bits in this that I remember so vividly, line deliveries especially.
Mm.
But there are some key songs that I just listen to just occasionally that are from like the opening number, Kickapoo. I listen to those. I'm like, this is just a good song. Like, this is just a good piece of fun. So that's been my history and relationship, and I wanted to bring it onto the podcast, talk about it, see how it holds up, and talk about like the Jack Black phenomenon and Kyle Gass as well, because lots of things just threw me off on a revisit. Like, I'll just say right now, and we can talk about it now as we go along, but it's interesting that Kyle is the dipshit fuck up one, and Jack is like the more put together one. Like, in the persona of Jack Black stuff, you would usually think Jack Black's going to be the dumb fuck up in the group, but it's Kyle. Kyle's like the asshole. Like, he's the
Mm.
prick and he's the dumbass, and he gets them in more trouble than Jack does. Jack's actually more sensible out of the two of them, and it's one of those things where it's like, I think of Tenacious D's music, I always remember, it's been a while since I've listened to them, but I was like, they're both idiots, but in my memory, Kyle's a bit more of a straight man. There's an entire song called Kyle Left the Band, in which it's just Jack singing by himself because they got into an argument and Jack Black was being a prima donna little bitch. And it's like, so it's interesting to come to the movie and it's like, oh, Kyle, who I've seen in a bunch of stuff, I always think of him as the more sensible one out of the two of them.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Kyle Gass, hence you can go back to our unappreciated masterpieces on Wild Hogs, and there are a few times, you weren't in that episode, but there were a few times where he would appear in the film as just a guy on stage who isn't introduced, and he's just like singing really emotionally, and I have no idea who he is. I just keep turning to Luke and Claudia and asking like, who is this guy? It's just random singing guy, but it's really good.
Yeah, yeah. And so what was your reaction to The Pick of Destiny? Tenacious D in The Pick of Destiny.
Yeah, this is a type of comedy that I really enjoy. This is a type of thing that if my stepbrother hasn't seen it, next time he comes over, I'd probably like put it on. It's like, yeah, let's watch this. It's fun. It's a comedy film about two dumbasses who are very passionate about their one thing. And their mind goes to crazy places about this one thing, but then the world kind of enables their values in some way. Like, oh, I've noticed that all these people who are big rock stars use this one type of pick, and then they ask about it and they find out like, oh no, yeah, there's an actual satanic thing to this, and there's another guy who tried to get it at one point, and he's going to try to betray you, and then Satan's actually real in the end, and it's just a really crazy ride, really funny, and this is the type of film that I really enjoy discovering that I haven't seen before. It's the type of film that reminds me of things that I watched growing up, like I guess like a lot of comedies that center around like two friends. Like you've got Bill and Ted, you got Dude, Where's My Car? Those types of films.
Exactly. And there's a bit, I referenced Cheech and Chong.
Wayne's World?
Wayne's World, yes. No, that's a great one. Wayne's World's a great one. Cheech and Chong are a great one in comparison to the others that you mentioned because they're pre-established characters. Like Wayne's World was on Saturday Night Live. Now I know Bill and Ted, they were pre-established because the creators of Bill and Ted used to do that as an improv thing, but the actors who play Bill and Ted in the movies, they got together for those movies. But like with Cheech and Chong and Wayne's World and Tenacious D, they have all of this built up chemistry because they've been touring and doing these gigs and performing these things on these sketch shows and this talk show and this. So when they finally get their movie, it feels like the ultimate culmination of events for things to happen. And, talking about the duo, let's talk about like Kyle, I guess, because funnily enough, we may have had Kyle in more movies on the podcast than Jack Black.
Okay, interesting.
He was in, and it makes sense because Ben Stiller produced this. Ben Stiller is in the movie, and Ben Stiller is someone who's in a lot of movies, and he has his finger on the pulse of weird comedy acts. Like, this movie is fucking filled to the brim with random comedians. Like, Neil Hamburger's in this movie as Neil Hamburger's here, but Kyle, he was one of the like stoner guys and the Cable Guy. He was in that, and I want to say we had him in Wild Hogs. He was in Wild Hogs as well as Kyle. Like, these type of things, we've had him. I'm just listing through the other ones. Like, he was in Elf, by the way. We haven't done Elf, but he's in Elf. I remember him in Elf as like one of the corporate boardroom members that he has to deal with. And
I haven't seen that in forever.
Peter Dinklage is there as well. Like, Kyle Gass has just been a guy who's recurred throughout Hollywood, but he's not like, outside of Tenacious D, it's not like he's a leading figure. He was in Year One as one of the eunuchs.
Oh, okay.
As one of the eunuchs with Oliver Platt and the gang. And like, he's just someone who
sounds like equal Jack Black and Kyle Gass, actually, which is surprising. I just assumed Jack Black way more than we've seen of Kyle Gass on the show.
Kyle's just someone who, outside of Tenacious D, he usually is just a little small bit player. Oh, there's Kyle Gass. Oh, here he is. And he's like, if you know who he is, it's fun. But he usually is a music guy or a stoner guy or just like a funny, bold asshole guy in movies. And that's been his role throughout Hollywood. So to see him step up to the plate and be one of the leading figures here, as he is supposed to be because it's Tenacious D's movie, what were your thoughts on Kyle's persona and just the way he plays into this as Jack Black's mentor? Because we're all deeply familiar with Jack and like his quirks and his styles, and all of that is here. All of Jack's stuff is in this movie. What did you think about Kyle?
Yeah, Kyle, despite the fact that I've apparently seen him in a good almost half dozen things, apparently, I just don't really know all that much about him because, growing up, Jack Black was the person that I knew. And when I discovered, like, oh, he's in a band with this guy named Kyle Gass, and he was the guy in Wild Hogs, that kind of opened up, like, okay, this guy exists. And, I hadn't, other than Wild Hogs, I didn't really know that he was in any of the other things we've done. And last year, I think they released a song called Video Games, or like the year before, and a guy that I'm a big fan of, Chris O'Neill, who does Oni NG cartoons and YouTube channel Oni Plays, did the animation for that music video. And he's always talked about how he's a big fan of Jack Black and Tenacious D. And so the fact that he got to do a music video with them and kind of has become friends with them is like a really cool thing. It's like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And I remember in the music video, he depicts Jack Black and Kyle Gass throughout it. And Kyle Gass is just the guy in the background who just keeps having like unfortunate things happen to him. Like, gets blown up, he gets like shot through the stomach, while Jack Black's this loud figure who's like constantly singing, and he's very much the front man. So I always kind of just imagine Kyle Gass as like guy in the background. Didn't really have a read on him, and so this film begins and he's introduced as the mentor with the long hair, and he looks kind of wise, and he's leading Jack Black along,
clearly leading him along.
And so that threw me off, like, oh, okay, this isn't how I thought the dynamic would be. And so when you do have the switch, it's like as soon as the wig comes off, that dynamic gets reversed, and it's really funny.
That flashback when he was a little boy reminds me, I don't know why, of when we cut away to things in the first two Austin Powers movies, like when we have the cutaways to like the family of the guy who got like eaten by bass or rolled over. It's like when we cut away, that's how it felt to me. I don't know why, like, felt very Austin Powers-y that moment.
Yeah. I really liked how the transition from that flashback to Kyle Gass in the present. It's like, oh yeah, they're making like a very similar facial expression. I can actually see the comparison there. So it's like the young casting in this film is really on point.
The kid's walking, the way he walked was so
little pumpkin.
Excellent. I was really taken aback again because of Jack Black is such the front man, and he's had a fantastic career. He's shown his dramatic side. He's shown his funny side. I was like taken aback, like a lot of the hijinks that I would expect Jack to be doing, Kyle is doing. Like, He's the one that gets distracted by the ladies. He's the
Mhm.
one that gets them into more trouble than you would expect. He's the one that's like kind of a leader for the first half of the film of the group. Like, he's the one with a bit more of a chip on his shoulder. Like, there's a lot of those things that I was kind of like, oh, this is a different way to approach it than I would have expected, especially with like the reputation and legacy of what Jack Black does in throughout his career. But I think Kyle really pulled it off. He has such specific line deliveries. The way Kyle drops certain one-liners or certain phrases sticks with me. And it's very funny because it's like Jack and him have such unique voices, but they bounce off of each other so well because they're doing that very what would you call it, like the surfer dude bro type like voices. Like, they don't sound like how Jack Black and Kyle Gass actually talk for the most part. Like, they talk like this, man. They just do that thing. Like, I don't know how
Stoner-esque, I guess.
Stoner-esque type of thing. They're doing they're performing, right?
Yeah.
And they're doing that, but they sound uniquely different. Like, Kyle sounds nerdier and a bit more of a schlub, while Jack is like, I'm metal incarnate and I'm so wanting to be cool, but he's a loser. But
they're excited about cool things kind of energy.
I will be saying to you that Kyle was the one I found funnier in the movie. I found him hysterical. I was just so like in awe of like his ability to use silence as well. So much of his comedy was just happening from his reactions to things as well as just the way he would deliver lines.
No, I think I can agree with that. Yeah, he's a lot more yeah, I'd say a lot more subtle, I guess. Jack Black, very much that energy is being upheld, and that's admirable in its own way.
My favorite line, the one I always quote from this movie when I go, oh, Tenacious D's in the Pick of Destiny, is Kyle in the Rock and Roll History Museum, in a breathy tone, being like, the cock. Use the cock. It's dumb. But we talked about this in a recent episode, like a good implementation of the word fuck can be, and this movie has so many of them. It is funny. And that's one where it's like a good implementation of saying a rude thing is very good. And they are so masterful at using crass humor and rude language in a way that doesn't feel only lowbrow. It doesn't feel like completely juvenile without any substance. Like,
it doesn't feel like they're just swearing for the sake of it and it's like, oh, we swore, what do you think of that?
Aren't we so cool and edgy? It just like with the first opening number, Kickapoo, where Jack Black's singing in this very angelic kind of church boy way.
Suck my cock.
Yeah, exactly. The suck my cock line. And it's and Jack delivers it with a little bit of venom in his voice. It's very deliberate. Like, the way that they use swearing is super specific. And as the hijinks and chaos ensues, like, I can also say, like, oh, this kind of reminded me of the Blues Brothers at points as well, especially with their car chase scene.
Yeah.
And their friend phones them up being like, hey guys, how's it going? And like, oh, it's great. Things are going well.
Yeah, I like how sometimes the JB character's energy kind of, I guess, gets in the way of the focus. That's a weird way of saying it, but I'm thinking of two moments in particular, and one of them's actually with the kid. It's when Dio tells him to, get up on his journey. When he gets out of bed, he does this like pose where he's like looking to the left and right, and it's like, what's that energy in favor of? And then I'm thinking, like, in the climax of the film when they're singing that song and they're doing the We Are the D bit, there's a part where Jack Black just like tries to do like a roundhouse kick or something, and it's like, what is that in favor of? It's just like little things like that where it's like, oh, he thinks he's being a badass there, but it doesn't look that cool, and it's very funny.
There's a history in comedy, especially in American comedies, of the funny fat guy. And I don't mean to, deride Jack Black, but he's definitely used that in his comedy. Like, a lot of the funniness of, your Chris Farley's, your John Belushi's, your Jack Black's is like, they're heavyset guy, but they have like this unbridled amount of energy where they fucking throw themselves through windows and furniture and go into these hijinks. And Jack Black always has had that throughout his career. Like, it's kind of funny to see him pathetically do a roundhouse kick attempt and then bounce back up like nothing happened. And it's just like how he brushes himself off, and he's one of the masters of that. And I've always like loved his physicality here. Now, as someone who, grew up with Jack Black in a more like child friendly, cleaner way, and you were familiar with these ruder things, how has it been for you over the years to kind of, tap into some more of that other side of Jack Black's career with something like this, in which you get to see him be more rowdy, use those kind of anarchic sensibilities you saw in the prism of children's entertainment and have it fully blown out for adult affair?
Yeah, now that you mention it, it does still very much feel like the same guy. It doesn't feel like, he's flipped a switch and become someone else. While we were talking before, for some reason I kept thinking of Ice Cube.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big thing we talked about in like the, are we there, are we done yet thing is like how it doesn't quite work there, where, he's trying to do this kind of comedy thing, but he's just from such a different world that it's kind of, clashing. But here with Jack Black, it's like, yeah, it's the same energy, the same kind of sense of humor. You can, and, this is written by him and you can really tell.
There are certain comedians or comedic personas that are made for adults or more adult friendly that can be transitioned to younger ages without ruining the thing that they were to begin with. Pee Wee Herman's a great example, where Pee Wee started a little bit more rude and crude, Paul Rubens in general.
Yeah.
But you transition that to children and it slides in so easily, and adults can still enjoy it because it's so bizarre and out off kilter and just weird. And Jack Black has that, where he can still work without the swearing and the drug use and like, the cock push-up stuff. And, because he has great line deliveries. He has great musical sensibilities. He has a great look. Like whenever I think of Jack Black, I think of his eyebrows. I think of how he uses and wiggles his eyebrows. I was thinking that scene of School of Rock where he's up at like the window and he has like his nose pressed against it and he just like does this wiggle of the eyebrow from the left to the right. It's just so specific, like so wiggly eyebrows. And the kid who plays young Jack Black, that's like the one of the things at the altar was they had to tweeze his eyebrows to be a bit more like Jack Black's, and that's all. Like they put the wig on his head, tweeze his eyebrows, and off to the races they were with that kid. It's like he knows how to do Jack Black. What a talent. But musically, what were your feelings towards Tenacious D and in The Pick of Destiny? Because this is your rock comedy opera affair. What were your feelings towards it as a musical?
Yeah, not too bad. I enjoyed it. Really liked the Carl Gass's first scene where they did like the classic music and Jack Black just kind of singing along to that. That was just really fun. I kind of got the energy that these guys kind of bring where, again, the only song I was really familiar with was that video game song recently. And there was a sort of like silly energy in that. So it gave me an idea of like, okay, this is the kind of thing these guys do together. And then obviously you start getting actual songs that they do throughout the film. And it is very much centered on that, characterization that they have of like, passionately singing about things that they find really cool and like talking themselves up. And there's like a sort of like lame aspect to it. So that was really fun to see the characterization come across in the songs themselves.
These two dorks who want to be metal gods, that's very much present. I enjoy the music. My big complaint about it is I wish more of the songs were created for the movie. Clearly,
that was a big question I actually wanted to ask you. Yeah,
it's been a while since I've listened to them, but like you don't even need to know fully, but like so many of them are either really short and sweet or ones that you can clearly tell are from their music already and they've kind of altered it or whatever it is for this. And that's my big complaint of like, I wish it was more like Tommy, where Tommy is a conceptual album. They brought it to the film and they really amped everything up. And I think the film shoots itself in the foot immediately when it comes to the music because it peaks for me in terms of musical. The first song
Mm.
and the last song, they bookend what I want the whole movie to be. More musical numbers that are actually like using utilizing the story of the movie and the character stuff and telling the stories throughout music, while the rest of them are like, here's a song about a Sasquatch, and we just kind of like work a way of making this song into the movie itself, rather than the movie that like has a story and the music tells the story.
You know what? You mentioning the Sasquatch thing almost was going to counter what I said, but most of the songs in the middle portion of the film are just them performing for a crowd.
Yeah, but Kickapoo and the one versing Satan, that they promise more of what I was hoping for.
Yeah, story is actually happening and settings being established.
And like gives you insight of the characters, plays with the themes of the movie, while still utilizing their comedy and their music styling. The rest of the time, it's like they're little, just, you could, this is the movie. It's a series of bits strung together. We were talking about this last time with Sailor Beware, where it's two comedians doing their thing. They're using some sort of foundation to just do their bits. And that's what this is. Like, there's a plot about Satan and heaven and hell, but really it's an excuse for them to do the cock push-up bit, or this song, or this song, or this song. And
yeah, it would have been great if, like, specifically around the time we got the Carl Gass flashback scene, if we could have like a Kickapoo level song that's all about him.
Oh, yes.
Because you mentioned like the two songs that kind of hit the level that you wanted. One of them was before his character was even established.
Oh, of course. And like musically speaking, I still enjoy it, but I wish it kind of leaned harder into that, into the Wall or the Pink, like the Wall or Tommy or like those kind of rock opera musical stuff.
Yeah,
those songs promised more of. Where it's funny because those songs are from albums that existed before the movie, but they're albums that are conceptual. While Tenacious D, they're comedy albums. They have little running bits, but they're not concept albums per se.
That was actually another thing walking in that I didn't know about, whether that was the case or not. Because I think when I looked up, like, Tenacious D, The Pick of Destiny, I was getting results for like the soundtrack or something, and maybe that threw me off. Like, oh, is this like one of those Tommy the Wall things that Ryan talked about, the concept albums? But yeah, and I was wondering throughout the film, like, oh yeah, I wonder how many of these songs are like pre-established or how many of them are actually made for the movie. So, and I think by the time I finished the film, I forgot to confirm that.
What are some things that you want to discuss, open up, and go through when it comes to The Pick of Destiny?
This is kind of tangential. This is kind of related to something that we mentioned on your last pick for the show. Did you read the trivia?
I did read trivia, yes.
Okay, so I'll just ask you straight up, is this film also a Chet-approved film?
Thank you. It is a Chet-approved podcast because Chet Hanks, although does not appear in this, his brother, who I mentioned in the Larry Crown episode as someone to deride, just because Colin Hanks is a legitimate actor in his own right who's been in a million things, fuck him. He's in this movie as a drunk frat guy, and apparently Tom Hanks was like, well, he did method acting. But it's like, oh yeah, I have two Chets at home. It's like, oh, it's like having two Chets. It's like, I love that Chet Hanks is like a fucking joke in the Hanks household. They're all like A-grade legitimate actors, award-worthy people, and then there's dude bro party animal fuckhead Chet Hanks who's just here to have a good time. I think I forgot to tell you, but there was like two rappers were having a beef, and apparently Tom Hanks asked Chet Hanks to explain the beef to him. Like, why are these two rappers, like, I think it was Drake and someone else, Kendrick or something, having beef? And Chet Hanks, you can look it up, I'm pretty sure it was this. Chet Hanks released the text messages between him and his dad of him explaining the beef. And Tom Hanks sounding like a very concerned parent, being like, why can't they just get along? Like, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. It's just silly stuff like that. But yes, a Hanks does appear in this. There's a lot of people appear in this before they were big or up and coming, or people who are like, got some cachet in a certain world. Like Amy Poehler's in this. She was the waitress at the bar at the restaurant.
Black eye?
Yeah, with the black eyes. Like, explain that, and she's like, burn it with a curling iron, and she's just giving this very performance. Like, she was already she'd already done some stuff by that point, but she was mainly like SNL person. Same with Fred Armisen, who plays one of the security guards at the Rock and Roll History Museum.
Oh, that was Fred Armisen.
Yeah,
Okay.
the one who's like, I've never fired a gun before. Oh, cool. Yeah, Fred Armisen. Yeah, that's him. There's a whole slew of people. Were there any that you noticed or you were happy to see turn up?
Well, I noticed in the opening we already mentioned it. I noticed in the opening credits it mentioned like, oh, Ben Stiller's executive producer. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then when he actually appeared, I'm like, oh, good. And yeah, he very much lent himself to the energy of the thing I mentioned before about how the world of this film sort of enables our main characters because, his character comes in and he's the one that's like, oh yeah, this Pick of Destiny thing is fucking real. This is the backstory. And that, on top of all the other films that this reminds me of, that also kind of reminded me of the two Zoolander films where, that's a film series that's set in a world where, superstar models are a big thing
but there's a conspiracy.
And there's a conspiracy behind it and like
that goes back history.
And even though there are normal people in the world who, aren't really into it, the wider community and the wider world, it's like the biggest deal. And, that kind of thing, even on a minor example, like Tommy Tricker and the Stamp Traveler, we talked about how, like, oh, stamps are the biggest deal. Like, that's just a really fun thing that I really like in films.
There were so many people here. Amy Adams is in this movie.
Is she?
Yes. She is in the scene in which they play at the comedy bar and Jack Black imagines how things would go and he blows off that guy's head.
Mm-hmm.
She's gorgeous woman. That's what she's credited as. You get several shots of her. She's the one like mouthing like, I love you and you're so cool and oh my God. And it's like,
is that the one that Carl Gass was like winking at or something?
Yeah, well, I think both of them.
Both of them.
We keep cutting to her every now and then. Yeah, Amy Adams. Another Amy Adams joint. Now, where was this in relation to Catch Me If You Can? And I've talked about this before. This is the first one. I've talked about this before, but Amy Adams, we keep encountering her when she was younger.
Yeah.
And Amy Adams is an incredibly attractive woman, gorgeous woman, as according to this. But when we encounter her, she's younger, and they got her playing dorky freaks, like she's a kooky nut job, or like she's got braces, or she's not like the most unattractive woman ever. And I'm like, it's weird because Amy Adams has gotten hotter as she's gotten older, I guess. But then in this movie, which came out at the height of all of those other ones being like, she's an uggo, here she is as gorgeous woman, and she was a smoke show. She's, I'm like, hey, it's Amy Adams, I see you. So that was a fun one. John C. Reilly, he was the Sasquatch.
Yeah, I read that afterwards. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, I could hear it in the voice, even though he's struggling with the teeth that they got put in him. I could hear, he just has a way of talking that feels a little bit dopey.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking like the costume or the makeup was like making that voice sound that, kind of weird. But reading that it was John C. Reilly, I'm like, oh, okay. The actor, kind of brought it to the role then.
Because he has a very, like I said, a kind of sweet, gentle, dopey kind of voice that he's got going on all the time. Hence, he can play Wreck-It Ralph and whatchamacallit, I'm forgetting, Step Brothers and all that, where he's just
Talladega Nights.
So he's just a dumb guy who's getting on by. It's so weird to remember that. I mean, he still does, but he has a very dramatic career.
Yeah.
Oh, he was in Chicago. That's what I was going to say. He plays the dopey husband, Mr. Cellophane, where he was in What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I've always wanted to.
He's great in it. Like, he's just an average blue-collar guy.
I think he's another one that I just assumed for a long time. Like, oh, he's in, like, comedies. But then, 10 years ago, I discovered, like, oh, yeah, he's actually in a lot of, serious films.
Now, did you love Tim Robbins in the movie as the person who tried to break into the Rock and Roll History Museum in the past and lost his leg?
The crippled guy?
Yes, that's
again
famous actor Tim Robbins.
That's probably the highlight of what I was saying before of like, the characters that enable their craziness. I especially loved his last scene.
Now, that's last time I talked about Larry Crown, I fucked up and said Shawshank Redemption with Tom Hanks. I'm sorry, Tim Robbins, Shawshank Redemption actor himself.
No, you didn't fuck up. I thought you did. You were just talking about the caliber of films.
Yeah, caliber of film. Well, Tim Robbins is here now. This is I think this is one of our first Tim Robbins joints, and it's him being an absolute weirdo. I really like the Comedy Store owner who then turned out to be Satan himself.
The MC.
I just loved like Satan's in our hearts. Like just golly gee, just like, or him at the beginning, like, in your ear pussies. Just like the way that he would just drop those lines.
No, he was
very
well
good.
used. Like
Paul F. Tompkins, he's always good. He's always.
I like the contrast in the dream sequence where it's like they repeated the thing of like, they told me not to read this, but I just have to say it.
But because I wrote it and I love them and they're my favorite band ever and they're so awesome.
And then at the end, like, he comes back as like this jolly, very similar to the girl in Freddy Got Fingered, where it's like she's saying something like really heartfelt,
but it's the grossest,
but it's gross
shit.
and immature.
Yeah, Freddy Got Fingered is actually a good comparison to this film because it was a flop. It was a comedic legend of a certain caliber, Jack Black with Tenacious D. And, you read the trivia as well, but Jack Black, after the failure of this, vowed to never write a script again.
Yeah, that was sad.
It lowered his confidence, and he's stuck to that. He's never written script again. Like, every writing thing is just Tenacious D related, but it's like, gigs or music or little sketches here and there, but nothing like this. He's never done this stuff again. And it is sad. It is sad. It's a bummer because I don't think this is bad. Like, is it the best comedy film ever made? No, but it's got, like, again, that kind of throwback charm to it of, like, your band movie where it's a comedy band movie. Like, there used to be, like I said, Cheech and Chong, great example. Like, there used to be those, and we don't have them anymore in the same way all the time. Like, Lonely Island had their one where they did, they have their productions where they also did their mockumentary about Justin Bieber, Never Stop, Never Stopping. But this, is Tenacious D coming up and being like, here's our story. What happens if we had to get the pick of destiny, which is Satan's tooth? And, Satan's played by fucking Dave Grohl, the drummer from Nirvana and the lead man from, Foo Fighters. And he plays the drums as Satan, don't worry. And they say 666 on him. Like, and we get Dio as the inspiration for Jack Black, which obviously, now I imagine you're not familiar with Dio.
No.
But you heard him. You heard what he sounds like.
Rockstar guy.
Clearly, he's like an inspiration for how Jack Black sings. Like, the way he sings, and you're like, yeah, I could tell Jack Black thinks Dio's fucking cool.
What band is he from?
Dio's from every band, but
okay.
He was the lead man for Black Sabbath after Ozzy Osbourne left.
Okay, so Stefan knows who that is.
Dio is a legend, no longer with us, but he was a legend. He had his own band. He was in a band before called Rainbow. He was a part of various projects, but he was beloved, as Jack Black even points out in the movie. Like, if you're into metal, heavy metal, and if you love voices, you listen to Dio. He had a magnificent voice, not a trained singer. Not a trained singer at all, but magnificent quality of voice. I love Dio. I loved when he appeared in this movie because as a kid, I was not into Black Sabbath myself. My parents, liked Black Sabbath. We'd listen. They just weren't for me. I would get into arguments with metalheads and, people like our friend Stefan or Reese for not liking Metallica or this or that. And but I like my stuff like Iggy Pop and David Bowie and stuff like that, and Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper, see, he's like the Dio equivalent, I guess, of like in Wayne's World when Alice Cooper shows up and you're like, oh, well, yeah, perfect for these guys. For them
We're not worthy.
Yeah. Dio's like the version of that here where he's like he's Jack Black's god in this. Dio means god, by the way, too. And metal. Yeah. So there you go. Metal god. But Dio, yeah, he was like 5'4". Had a voice like that where he could just fucking project it. One of the behind the scenes trivia is he brought his own microphone and they're like, no, it's fine. We've got our stuff set up. And he's like, okay. And he did the first take, nailed it, completely destroyed their mic. His voice was so powerful. It completely destroyed their microphone and like, fuck. And he's like, that's why I bring my own mic.
You said first take. I think the thing actually said it was like the practice take.
Oh
or
yeah, the
something.
practice. Yeah, he's like, here we are, just do it, and he nailed it. But he completely shreds their mic. He's like, that's why I bring my own.
And apparently, like Jack Black talked him down from doing another take.
Yeah. He wanted to be more involved in the movie. He's like, he really loved doing it, but they had no way to use more of him because the role was so small.
They should have done what they did with Chris Rock in Pootie Tang, where he just played a bunch of characters.
They kind of tease that with Meatloaf reappearing in one other scene as like the face of the crowd booing Jack in the rehearsal. Like,
Well, it's the same character though.
yeah, but what I mean is like reusing them, even though the
Yeah.
character physically isn't there, or like they're not really that character. I was shocked that you didn't get Jack Black acting opposite Meatloaf in this. Not one time
That's a
did
good
they.
point. Because wasn't the trivia point like, oh, I always wanted Meatloaf to be my dad?
Yeah, and he did, and it's great casting.
But it's little what's his name Gentile.
Yeah, and then transplanted head of Meatloaf in post
Yeah.
to yell at Jack Black, call him names. Yeah, Dio, I love Dio. So when as a kid, the poster on the door, I'm like, oh my god, it's Dio. Oh, this is cool. Because as I was saying, I got a lot of flack because my other thing was I liked Dio better than Ozzy Osbourne. And this, remember, 2005, 2004 time, Ozzy Osbourne was still the shit because he had his show. He had the Osbournes.
He was in Goldmember.
He was in Goldmember. Like, he was a pop culture icon at that time still. Dio...
He had a soundboard, I think, online.
Yeah, but Dio, you know, most people who are into that music will recognize he has a superior voice in every way. But, like, if you say you're a bigger fan of Dio than Ozzy Osbourne, for some Sabbath heads, that's murder for you. You're dead. You're gone. But technically speaking, he is superior. Like, he's superior, and he has, as you could tell, more of that style I like, that kind of glammy, theatrical. And even though he gets like 20 seconds of song here, it's my favorite bit of the movie because his voice is so fucking good, especially when he like goes real high and he like makes it sound like Lovely to Go to Hollywood. But he starts out the song like snarling and growling and he's like really up close, and then it just transcends. It's a real transcend. I think he works really well as like a counterpart to Meatloaf. Like, the way they both sing are very different. Like, Meatloaf has that kind of Elvis-y sound to his voice, like where you can hear the accent, like the accent in his vocal quality of like, with the way he would pronounce words, it would have like certain inflection on the end of it, where, you know, you can just feel like he's a good old Southern boy, like Jesus loves him more, that kind of thing. And
sound like Goofy.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you know what I'm talking about? Like,
oh, yeah.
And that's the thing too, Meatloaf. Are you that familiar with Meatloaf as a presence at all?
As a general presence, I guess, yeah. I didn't pick him out as soon as he appeared. Afterwards, I was like, oh, yeah, that was Meatloaf. But, yeah, again, not the biggest music guy. I probably only know a few songs by him.
He's an actor, too. He was an actor as well. He was in Fight Club.
I have a copy of that. Haven't watched it yet.
And he was in Rocky Horror, of course. He was Eddie in Rocky Horror.
Who was Eddie? I've only seen it the one or two times.
He was, he was Meatloaf, but Eddie was the one that came out of cryogenic freeze on the motorcycle on the saxophone. He was like the 50s greaser rock and roll guy.
Yeah, there was someone like that.
Frankenfurter used half of his brain for Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
He was the former lover of Frankenfurter.
Yeah, was he only in one scene?
Yeah, he's in one scene, but it's an amazing scene.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
Which, shock of shocks, I didn't realize this until the trivia, this was the first time since Rocky Horror that he had done like a musical performance in a movie or show since. Like, that he sang in a movie. He sang in, like, because he was an actor. Like, he was in a bunch of stuff over the years. Like, he was in Monk. I remember him in Monk very well as like a voodoo priest. Reverend, very good. He was so good in Monk.
It wasn't him, but I remember there was a joke about him in South Park.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was, Chef knew him when he was younger and he went by the name Couscous. And he's like, I don't know why I'm not working. It's like, oh, here, have some meatloaf.
When he was in Spice World, he was their bus driver in Spice World. He was their biggest fan, and you loved him in that.
Yeah, he was good in that, wasn't he?
He was, Meatloaf was never my musician. He's not for me, but I always have loved him as a performer. Like, watch his music videos, watch his live shows, watch him in acting. He really threw his whole effort into it.
That sounds like someone Jack Black would really like then.
Yeah, and he kept popping up in the industry. He only died a few years ago, sadly.
He was one of the COVID tragedies. I think.
I'm pretty sure. And I always enjoyed seeing him in things, but it was a delight to see him here, and he gave it his all. He really threw himself in and just said, "I'm going to have fun with this. I'm going to
He was really good.
Because he also played around with a lot of like Christian stuff and religious stuff throughout his work. So to see him as like the overly religious father is great. Like I've seen him play a bunch of priests and things, or reverends or ministers. To wrap out the Meatloaf thing, I have one story to tell, a personal story of Meatloaf. Okay, so when I first came down to Melbourne. First ever time coming to Melbourne, I flew down. Oh, and Wayne, he's in Wayne's World as well. Yeah, he's like he's tiny in Wayne's World. Again, we can keep going over Meatloaf. But I came down to Melbourne, and when I came down, the AFL Grand Final just happened. So the AFL is obviously Australian Football League. It's a sport. I don't care about it, nor does Bartek.
Yeah, but I grew up down here, so I had to hear about it.
But it was a monumental game. It was the first time Sydney, which is in a different state to Melbourne, of course.
It's the capital of Ryan's home state.
Got to the grand final. And it was a big deal because AFL is a Victorian state sport primarily. Like, it's called AFL, but it used to be called VFL for a reason, which is Victorian Football League. It used to be called that, but it was the first time an outer state team got there. Big deal. The out-of-state team lost, but the thing that was also very interesting was Meatloaf was the half-break musical act.
Oh, okay. I didn't know AFL did that.
Yes, they do. At one point for the AFL, he was there, and he got into a lot of controversy because he was lip-syncing, and he was very bad.
Okay.
And he didn't do a good live show. It was a fucking awful show. And he reacted very negatively and poorly and blamed Australia and really went out against us. He called out the AFL. He called out all this stuff. He basically pushed back against people criticizing him for giving a terrible show. And he just reacted very poorly. And Australia vowed from that day on never to have Meatloaf return. And he never did. And that was my introduction to Melbourne. Melbourne Live.
I was about to say... You and the Sydney Swans.
We have a long-running history. As someone who doesn't follow sport, I have a long-running history with those fucking Swans.
You tell the story of, like, when I first came down here, the Sydney Swans, and you have the one that you always tell. So when you like, Meatloaf has something to do with this, like, was he at the airport?
Yeah, and another thing that happened with this AFL was there was a time, I think it was the first time I came down, maybe the second. It was always around that time of year. In Excess were doing a thing, even though the lead man is no longer with us. And we were on the same tram as a saxophone player from In Excess. He was just on the tram, saxophone in case, heading off to the AFL. No one was speaking to him. No one recognized him. We recognized him. You know who that is. If you're into music, you know who that is. And it just kind of like... I don't know. I still feel conflicted about it. It's like, he's one of the greatest musicians of all time in Australia, just riding the tram like everybody else, and no one recognizes it. I don't know. It just kind of makes me feel sad, but also like weirdly happy. Like, I don't know. It's a mixture of weird emotions. But that is all I have to say about Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. Now we're drifting off into personal stories. I recommend it. I think it's good. I think it's a great time. It's not a heavy hitter. It's not the laugh out loud every second type of thing, but it has that certain, again, just coarse humor that can hit really well when you need it to. And they're clearly passionate about what they're doing. Like, this isn't, we mentioned Step Brothers before. This isn't one in which it feels to me they put a camera down and then let them improvise and just use the best takes.
No.
They have a script in mind. They're clearly improvising at times, but there's a lot of artistry done with the direction as well, like some interesting camera moves and compositions and fun opening credits, and the music is placed nicely. Like, it's very, for as throwaway as you may think, it's very meticulously crafted, and I appreciate it for that. Do I wish that it went further? Of course I do. Of course I do. Like, I could see those tinges of Tommy in this.
Hmm.
And reading the trivia, that was deliberately there. They were inspired, but boy, I wish they went with more. Boy, like, if Meatloaf was in this more, or if this was in this more, like this, like, with Tommy, Oliver Reed was in that movie so much. And he's not a singer, but boy, was he fun.
I think there was the Who poster in the
Yeah, it
first
was.
bit,
Yeah. And Queen and all the big bands were there. Would you recommend, and is there anything else you want to say as we wrap this out?
Yeah, before you were talking about the screenplay and how Jack Black, vowed never to write a screenplay again because, he was so distraught by how poorly the film performed. I honestly think, there isn't really much more that this film needed. It just kind of needed that personal touch. And I think it got it. I mean, it had the comedy that these guys are known for. It brought about their energy, very similar to what we were talking about literally last episode. The two leads of this film have worked together and you can see their chemistry on screen, especially after the twist when we're kind of done with the mentor Carl Gass character. Yeah, I just think this is exactly what it needed to be. And, you could tell it was very clearly inspired. Like you brought up the Wayne's World, Alice Cooper thing, how, that was their idol. And you mentioned also that, the Dio guy is big inspiration for Tenacious D, and he's in the film, and you have all the posters of the types of things that he liked, and, you explaining it a bit more, I'm seeing, the connection that Jack Black has to all these bands, and it feels like his project. And I think that that's a very impressive thing to get across in your screenplay. So even if he, doesn't work in writing screenplays again, I think the one time he did it, he nailed what it kind of needed to be. And yeah, I do recommend this film. I think it is the right level of fun. It's not, the biggest, most ambitious thing of all time that will, get you falling out of your seat laughing, but it is a funny film. It has genuine ideas to it, and yeah, give it a go.
Give it a go, please. Now, we are going to hear what the listening people's recommendation for a movie is next time on the podcast. And we mentioned him by name, but Stefan has recommended a whole batch of films for us to cover.
He basically tripled our list.
Previous guest and a friend of ours. And I thought we should continue the role of music stuff, but this is not, as I haven't seen it. As far as I'm aware, it's not a musical, but it is made by a director who is the guy of music right now, Damien Chazelle, who did Whiplash and everyone's favorite Emma Stone winning picture, La La Land. It is his film Babylon, which is a very contentious thing. I haven't seen it. I don't know too much other than it's a period piece drama about early Hollywood, and people love or fucking hate this movie.
Oh, that's divisive.
It's really people are divided on this. It's contentious. People are like, no, you have to understand them. But I have no understanding as to why that is. Margot Robbie's in the movie, and the other thing I'll say, because I always like to mention this, it's long. So
okay.
I think it's nearly 3 hours long or 2.5 hours long. So keep that in mind for giving it a watch in the interim. I hope everyone, you make sure to watch Babylon in the meantime, because when you come back to us, you can hear us talk about it in depth. You can hear Bartek be like, oh my God, it really was the first of the Babylon projects.
Yeah.
It got sabotaged, and I can't wait for them to get to Babylon 4.
I've seen the sequel, but I haven't seen the original.
Oh man, we're nerds. We can both make those jokes now. Back in the day, it would have just been me making that joke, and you would have been like, okay, yep, okay. He's doing one of those Babylon 5 references again.
He's talking about one of his sci-fi shows.
He's talking about one of his sci-fi shows.
Hey,
Yucky.
Listening people, literally, I walk into Ryan's house today, and what's on the TV?
Guess. Yeah, that's right. It was Star Trek. It was the original series, baby, The Man Trap. I was just revisiting my good friend Jim Kirk, where he said the line, "She's a very handsome woman." But thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you have recommendations and or you just want to reach out and let us know your thoughts and opinions on things, look at our social medias of Facebook and Twitter. We are Spit and Polish Presents, and you can email us directly over at
spitandpolished@gmail.com.
Well, it's been a lot of work today, Bartek, to try and be the best of the best. We didn't mention that the ending of this movie is just they now have a bong of destiny that they break off Satan's horn and use it for smoking pot. But I do appreciate the credits roll. They talk about metal and all of that. And it just cuts back to them still sitting there uninspired. They haven't progressed. It's not like this ends on a Bad Boy Bubby type thing where it's like somehow, some way they become these music success stories. No, they're still just stagnant characters. They haven't they haven't overcut, like they haven't gone anywhere.
Their goal is very similar to like the Bill and Ted goal of like, in the future we have to become the greatest musicians. Like even Dio sings it at the beginning, like you're destined to become what was it, like the rockinest band or something like that?
It's the classic, like, we have to win the competition. We have School of Rock.
Yeah.
We have to win the competition.
We have to win the competition, but then, Satan's at the door and they defeat him in a rock off and then the competition's no longer a thing.
And then they're just still sitting there being like, we haven't really worked out as a band, have we? We've been distracted by side missions.
And we don't have George Carlin assuring the audience, like, they do get better.
They do get better. Oh, man, if George Carlin was in this, man, was he was gone by this point, right? Or was he still doing Jersey Girl?
No, I think he was still around.
Because he did Jersey Girl around the same time, right? That was his last one, yeah? He was in that.
Was that his last film?
I think it was one of his last ones, yeah, if I'm not mistaken. Well,
when did he die?
That is it. Thank you all so much. Rock on.
Party on, dudes.
Party on, rock out, dudes. Now it's a Bill and Ted episode.
Shibby.
Do you think Bill and Ted would have liked their music, Tenacious D's music? Do you think they would have been fans?
Yeah, we did mention their only fan in the film, but they would have, if he wasn't in the film, it would have been Bill and Ted, yeah. As their rivals.
As their rivals. Wild Stallions. That's the thing, they didn't have a rival band. That would have been fun if they had... Satan was their rival, I guess. But, you know what I mean? They didn't have, like, another band that they were fighting against.
Yeah.
And, it's like some prog rock band or something. It's Tool. See, that's for the music heads. Bartek doesn't know who that is, but I do.
I know Tools. You go to Bunnings.